Well, Justin, I want to thank you for taking time to talk about your new film. We finally get to meet.
I'm
I've
telling you.
I've covered a number of your films over the years here on the channel, so pleasure to meet you, sir.
Same here, same here. And outside of the reviews that I watch for my
Yeah.
films, I've
Yeah.
also watched a lot of your reviews, and I love your channel, man. You're always so energetic, and you have such an excitement for film, and it always
Uh,
bleeds through in on your reviews.
well, you are too kind. I appreciate that quite a bit. And your films I've thoroughly enjoyed, and you've got a new one now. Yesterday is almost here, is why we finally get to meet face to face. And before we
Yeah,
before we dive into it, because I went into it cold, I looked at the description on IMDb, and I'm like, okay, this seems something a little bit different, but if you wouldn't mind giving my listeners just a brief summary in your words, what Yesterday is Almost Here is about.
Um, I I would say in giving you the plot, it is certainly a fledgling writer who begins to suspect his wife of having an affair, and he goes on somewhat of a emotional odyssey with the supposed lover's wife. So I would say that's the basic
Mhm.
synopsis of the film. But I would say more about what the film is about a crisis of self
Sure.
and how we as one of the characters says, you spend your whole life running away from who you are, only to realize you've been running towards it this entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and especially as creatives, I think self-doubt comes with the rest. You're
yes,
you're always whatever you're creating, and I've heard that even from folks who've been, you know, uh, massive projects and very successful. They, in interviews and stuff, they even still say that, yeah, they still have that self-doubt and that questioning of oneself and what you're doing while you're doing it. Uh,
certainly, certainly,
and that's addressed here. Now, I'm going to say, I most of your material that I've viewed has been mostly been in the horror vein. So when I
yes.
saw that this was about, relationship troubles and exploration and that, I'm like, okay, all right, I'm good with someone, branching out. But then I watched it and I'm like, oh no, there it is. There. I'm like,
It's still there underneath
it's
the surface.
I'm like, there it is. As your character Douglas starts getting more and more paranoid about what might be happening with him, with his wife, or and his friend, in quotes, friend.
Yes.
Now, you wrote the script as well. Where did the idea for this come from? What made you want to tell this particular story?
Well, I was going through somewhat of a similar issue in my life and a
Mhm.
realization in
Sure.
my life where I started to realize that in many ways I had become this amalgam of the image that everyone carries of me,
Hmm.
as opposed to actually being me. So I was all these different things to all these different people. And once you start realizing that and starting to peel that away, you start wondering as you peel back more layers, like where's me? Where am I in all of this?
Mhm.
And I think some people have categorized it as somewhat of a of an ego death,
Mm.
and mine was beginning as I started writing this script, and I think that's where the main influence came from.
Yeah, and I can see that, especially through your main character, Douglas, played very unrecognizable Nicholas Brendan in this.
Yeah,
I was like, Nicholas Brendan, okay, and then I'm watching the movie like, wait, which character did he play? Because I couldn't quite, and it wasn't until after I looked back, after I watched the movie, I went back and go, oh, that was him. I mean,
yeah.
the performance he put in here was crazy, and your whole cast, actually, a lot of talented folks in here. How did you bring this cast together? Were they people that you had in mind while writing it, or did you actually seek out your character, your performers after you wrote the script?
There's only one person in the entire film who was someone I knew was going to play a part,
Sure.
and that was Neelis Jello. He played Gary.
Yeah.
He was Gary, always going to be Gary. I think he's been in almost everything I've ever directed.
Sure.
Excuse me. He's just such a wonderful, wonderful guy and a wonderful
Mhm.
performer and wonderful professional. And so he was one person that I knew was always going to be in it. As for everyone else, they won out their roles. I
Mhm.
put up casting notices. I was very surprised when Nicholas Brendan submitted himself. I was like, wait a minute, what? And I said, "Are you sure? Did you read how much money I have? Did you read the description?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And sure enough, he submitted an audition, and it was incredible. And I said, "That's my guy." And so we spent maybe a couple months just really talking about the character. I
Sure.
prefer that approach. Even with Philip is one of those kind of guys you just wind him up and let him go.
Sure.
Everything he did was incredible. Um, but yeah, it was one of those kind of things where we sat around and everyone went through the auditioning process and they turned
Mhm.
in incredible auditions, and it left no doubt who should play each character. And yeah, I was blown away by what we were able to do with a limited amount of time and a limited amount of resources that we had. Everyone turned in great
Sure.
performances.
That true indie story of time and money, both you usually
Time
have
and money.
short of, right?
Yeah,
But yeah,
definitely.
but yeah, I love the talented cast. You can tell they all bring it, especially for this because this is a character-driven piece. It's not like
Yes.
something like Axeman where you've got, well, we can break this up with, a murder or a shot of the axe or something. I mean, well, you could, but in
Mhm.
here it is definitely more character-driven. So having this cast who seem to really gel and get the assignment, and I'm gonna say right now, you really wrote Dan to be an abrasive character. but actually all the characters are kind of layers because they you like them, but you also see their flaws. Except I would say Pia probably is the least one, but Dan especially, I was like, wow, I'm like, where did you dig this character from? Because
Believe it or not, he is the combination of three people that I know.
mm,
And it's so funny because all three people worked for a copier company. I used to sell copiers as well. So that's where this whole thing came from
sure,
about them selling copiers.
sure.
I used to sell copiers, and two of those people were my supervisors. One
Mhm,
was like a branch manager, the other was like a regional manager.
sure.
And those were the two main influences because they were super abrasive guys,
Hmm.
but they were always well intentioned,
Hmm.
always well intentioned. They were definitely looking out or trying to look out for you the best way they knew how.
Right.
But it didn't always feel that way.
One of those that, well, like you said, a breakdown of ego, a breakdown of who you actually are versus the front you put up, which we have that transition. You have Dan who's putting up that front still of being that
Hmm.
guy, and you have Douglas who used to be that guy, but is trying not to be that guy. He's trying to do something else, but having Dan there keeps pulling that back out, and you hear those stories of people, be careful who you hang around because you could
Hmm.
become like them, and I felt like that's what you were kind of going for here, where Dan was reemerging the Douglas that he didn't quite like anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Douglas had went through quite a bit of a change.
Right.
He went from being Dougie, which was that person who was very, very similar to Dan, to being someone that his wife and her circle could respect more,
Right.
right? And he's not very happy being either. He's not happy being Dougie. He's not happy being Douglas. he was much happier before he was both of those things.
Hmm.
And it's about, I think in many ways it can be interpreted as he's going backwards to being Dougie, but I think he has to go backwards through Dougie to become himself. Because that was the most recent version is of course Douglas, and then
Right.
he has to go back through Dougie to get to who Douglas Winter really is.
He has to deconstruct the guy he was before he can move on, rather than just reject it, because just
Hmm.
cutting that off and going, I'm gonna be something different now, doesn't always cut it. Especially
Yes.
after so many years, it sounds like that he's been Dougie. Um,
Hmm.
so,
Yes.
but yeah, him and Dan really, man, some of those scenes were intense. And then your two female leads in here, Jackie Moore and Shoshana Wilder, are also great in here, feeling like these two are just caught up in the middle of all
Hmm.
this. And what I found interesting is how the where you take Veronica as we learn more about her. And it was one of those where I still was questioning, I'm like, why is she with Doug? I mean, even when before, I always ask that some relationships in these movies. You look at it, and go, why? She could
Yeah.
do so much better, but
Yeah. But here's the thing. I don't know if we always want what's best for us. I think we want what we want.
mhm,
And she wants someone who is malleable
right.
to her way of life.
Mhm.
And she found a guy who was super malleable. He will change everything about himself to be with her and stay with her, and he'll keep stuffing himself back down and back down and back down, uh, so that he can always be what she wants him to be. But we always learn that you can only stuff down so long, right?
Right.
Because that's not who he really is. The
Mhm.
person that she's making him to be. She's probably tried in the past to mold people into
Mhm.
what she needs them to be. Because let's face it, I don't know if if you've spoken with any soap actors, but those guys work a lot,
Yeah. Hmm.
and their partners have to be okay with that.
Right.
It's long days, and they're not around, they're not accessible, and you have to be very much open to that way of life.
Yeah,
Um,
they're recording constantly. I mean, you got a show that's on every day, Monday through Friday. It's like,
exactly, exactly. And so she needed someone who would be okay with that, and she could throw him some crumbs here and there every time. She's gotten him into screenwriting and stuff like that, so she's able to kind of keep him on a leash that way as well, and kind of guide him along. And it's a source of, if he becomes a successful writer and maybe a producer or something like that, he could have some power, because in television, writers have power. They become producers. So he's very malleable, and that's what she's been looking for, I think.
but he's also very paranoid, and I'm wondering if it's just because for what he gave up, he's paranoid of losing her constantly, because that's where that jealousy and that friction come up between him and Dan. Instant, you see that. And one of the angles that I thought was interesting, because this is where things get a little dark in parts in here. That's where I was like, oh, nope, there's some of that horror element in here. But looking at it, I'm like, how much of what we are seeing, and you don't have to answer, I'm trying not to spoil too much, but how much we are seeing is actually happening, and how much of this is actually what we're seeing Douglas interpreting things as, because the whole movie's really being told from his perspective, and we do get some moments here, because there's moments of calm, and then there's a lot of moments not calm. And I was trying, especially when we get to the end, I was like sitting here going, how much of this was him and how much were we seeing of actual reality? And I loved that aspect of it, you keeping it. That was that kind of intentional.
Yeah, I mean, we're all the heroes of our own stories, right? None of us think we're villains. So he definitely sees everything through that filter.
Hmm.
Um, and there's many times when we play out things in our head, it can seem very realistic.
Hmm.
We can sit back and we can say, no, 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 that for sure happened. Even though I wasn't there, even though I didn't see it, I know that what happened.
Right.
And I think that's much of what's going on,
Mhm.
um, not necessarily in the film, but certainly in his mind.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially with, him used to be Dougie, it makes you wonder how much of that he put up because he was more of an insecure, paranoid, like not confident guy, so he overcompensated by being Dougie. And I was trying to figure out, is Dan the same way? And I'm like, no, Dan's abrasive and Dan, but he seems to have a heart underneath. And again, when I thought about it, going, well, is this whole thing being told from Douglas? It's like, how much of Dan is actually that way, and how much of that is Douglas perceiving it that way, and we're seeing it how Doug perceives Dan as being. If
Yeah.
that makes sense. I maybe
No,
I'm
no,
digging
it
too
does.
level, too deep, but
No,
I was
it
just
does. I think that his idea of Dan
Mhm,
and how he sees Dan and how he shows Dan to us is real.
mhm,
I think that some of the things that he imagines Dan doing comes from a place of his own insecurity.
right.
I think that to be susceptible to that much malleability, you have to not like yourself that much.
Right. Mhm,
I think it goes past lack of confidence into just not liking who you are underneath. Somebody has told you that that's not cool.
right.
Somebody has told you that that doesn't work. And more importantly, you believe them.
Right.
So I think that that's more or less, you know,
Mhm,
uh, Douglas and why he sees things the way he sees them. It comes from a place of deep insecurity. There's no way that this woman likes him. There's definitely no way
right.
that she truly loves him. And there's no way in the world he'd get her to marry him. But all those things happened.
Mhm,
So now there's no way on earth that he can keep her.
right.
Right. I think that that's much of what he goes through with his wife, and that's a hard way to live.
That is, yeah. That
You know.
is, can't look at yourself in the mirror, you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a very difficult thing.
to the point where there's a hook, a recurring thing you have in here with a picture in a frame of those two earlier, and it keeps getting put under the couch or whatever, and he keeps thinking she's doing it,
Hmm.
hiding it, like she doesn't even want to acknowledge that they're together. And I thought that was interesting as well. Of, it could easily have fallen on the floor, but he's that insecure. And, when you're writing a character like this, how do you find the balance? Because you don't want to go too far into caricature, because then people might check out and go, "Oh, this just feels too unrealistic." But you still want to you still want to show those extremes. How do you balance that to where you go just enough to where you're like, yeah, I can see that, without going, oh, this is just ridiculous, this is just made up type of situation.
I think it goes back to the collaboration that I have with the performers,
Mhm,
and I have that same collaboration with my DP as well.
mhm,
We sit back and we talk about the story and what's happening in this scene and how it reflects that scene's place in the overall picture.
right.
So it's consistent communication and collaboration with everyone. And there are times when the actors would come to me and they would say, "Hey, man, if we're trying to drive home this point, uh, do you think it might be too much? Do you think we haven't maybe done enough?" And a lot of the times it led to a rewrite here or there. As a matter of fact, there were quite a few scenes that we rewrote on the set. Um, the scene which for you it may not be, it may be just a kind of it's just a scene,
Sure,
but to me
sure.
it was probably my most favorite scene. Was a complete rewrite. The scene where Pia steps outside and sits on the porch,
Oh, the
and
porch scene. Yeah,
the porch scene,
absolutely. Yeah.
and Douglas comes out. All that was a complete rewrite on the
Was it
set.
really? Wow.
Yeah, it was
That
supposed to take place somewhere else entirely. And we sat down and we were like, okay, we're not going to go to this other location, and we don't need all this other action set pieces. I think we can communicate this through just the feeling, and you guys' delivery. I think we can communicate it very well, and I think we pulled it off.
Like you very much did. In fact, for a film like this that people might think, oh, it's another relationship triangle, loves, conflict or whatnot. The dialogue in that scene is probably the most blunt dialogue out of the entire film. And the fact that you said that it was rewritten and, with the help of the talent, I'm like, that's awesome that you have talent that's comfortable with what's being said and the way they do deliver it. I'm like, oh man, I'm waiting for the axe to come out. I'm waiting for the axe to come out.
We had to really push him. We had to really push him.
Yeah. But everybody sells that scene, and that's ended up becoming it almost felt like a bit of a pivotal scene of breaking point for your Douglas character of going, we've already seen him unstable, but this part here seems to really just kind of be that breaking point. And I thought it was a really effective scene. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that the location you had as well. I mean, it's pretty much shot all in one location, except for the one when they go into town scene. How'd you find this location, and what was it like shooting in that place? Because it didn't look like it was that big.
Yeah, very. I mean, the town itself is relatively small, and the cabin was even smaller. But I tell you, it was so funny, and I'm gonna tell you a story, but go a long way around it.
That's fine.
So that wasn't the original cabin we were supposed to shoot in.
Oh, okay.
We were supposed to shoot in the same cabin that we did for Axeman 2.
I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for whatever reason, it fell through.
Sure.
And it's in the same general area. So we found someone else that said, oh, maybe you can come check out mine. And so we said, okay, great. The DP and I go, and keep in mind, we'd already scouted the previous cabin, and we show up at this one. They were kit cabins, which means that they're exactly the same.
Right.
Exactly the same, even pointed in the same direction. So we were just like, well, only difference was because this one was on a hill. It had little stilt in the underground area, but besides that, it was exactly the same. So it required very little for us to be able to work, with this location.
Sure.
Now, that being said, it was a very small cabin, so that's why we went anamorphic, so that we could make it seem a little bit bigger inside than what it actually was. Because if we had a shot very spherical lenses, it would have just looked extremely tight. Everything would have looked extremely tight.
Right.
But yeah, this town is one that's just outside of Fraser Park, and normally I would deliver exactly the name of the area. However, it was not a pleasant experience.
Oh, no.
It was a very unpleasurable experience.
Sure.
We had Teamsters that came out that tried to shut us down because we shot this one non-union. So they were trying very hard to get it shut down. They were pressuring different townspeople to like sit out front and make noise and do stuff like it. It was so crazy. It was so crazy. But the reason why I don't want to say the town is because the town didn't offer much of a support system to kind of quiet that.
Right.
They just let it go on.
They just let it go on and didn't try to at least curb it a bit for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that is unfortunate, and I think that's a side of things that people don't always realize out there that you do run into, especially I imagine out in California where, you run into more people in the business in some way, shape, or form than not in the business in some way, shape, or form out there. Whereas where I am in the middle of Wisconsin, I don't have to worry so much about, Teamsters showing up, filming in my cabin in the woods. They'll have to find it first.
Exactly. But here they knew we were there. They showed up on the first day. I think as soon as we rolled camera, a guy showed up.
Wow. What timing? And how long did you shoot for this?
We shot 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
2 weeks shoot. Pretty short shoot.
Did the challenges that they presented, did that speed up your shoot a bit, or did you just kind of, we're still going to do what we're going to do and we're just going to deal with that separately?
Well, I think, for very um, sound dependent scenes,
Sure, yeah.
it created issues,
Hmm.
but there were ways to deal with it.
Right.
There were ways to deal with it, and so
Hmm.
we were able to get through the production without having to change too much. Mostly, we had to drop a few scenes, but
Sure.
it was okay though. It was okay. Uh, the what we intended to do, you
Hmm.
were you were able to see in the film. So even if we had certain scenes that we couldn't use, it was fine. I think that we were able to put things together in such a way where it was still very cohesive.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it definitely, you can't tell that there was any troubles or anything if you watch the film for sure. So that definitely does not come through. But yeah, that have that challenge. I know the audio part because I happened to be, I had the opportunity to be on a set as a script supervisor, and we were filming a scene, and it's supposed to be a remote cabin, but there was a
Hmm.
road next to the location we're shooting. So you had to wait
Oh,
until a car goes by. So the audio guy would be like, "Oh, wait." And you have to wait. And that car you could hear for like a mile down. I mean, you don't realize how far that travels until.
I'm telling you, especially when it's extremely quiet
Mhm.
and it's like hold for car, hold for plane, hold for someone talking, hold for someone watching television. Can someone go over there and ask that person to turn off the television? It was like, oh, geez.
Yeah, and so I never really even thought about it till I was there and said I realized like, oh man, that's a challenge. Now I know why audio guys get the respect they do, engineers in
Yeah.
that, because man, and you have a great production look to this, even though being as you put it, a smaller budget film in that, I did like the overall look and everything of this, and your DP as well, the cinematography in that. Had you worked with this camera person, the DP before? Is this someone you use often, or?
No, no, no. I never worked with him before,
Mhm.
and his name is David Gordon, and he was stupendous. We sat down and went through tons of movies that were my influences visually.
Mhm.
One of them being In the Mood for Love.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So that was one of my huge visual influences for the film. And so, we sat down and really worked out the look. It was very funny because we sat down, we shot it, everything looked great, sent it off to the colorist, and he started doing some things, and we were just like, okay,
Yeah.
I guess, and it was one of those kind of things where I was looking back at David and I was like, is this is this what we're trying to do? And he was like, I mean, I guess. And I said, no, I don't think so. So the guy colored the entire film. We paid a
Mhm.
colorist to color the entire film. And then I went back and not only did I recolor everything, but I re-edited everything.
Oh,
I
sure.
was like, because we had an editor who worked on it,
Mhm.
and he's a phenomenal editor. I take nothing away from him at all, but I just felt like it still wasn't the story we were trying to tell.
Mhm.
And I think he took a great crack at it, but it just, you know, in the editing process, you still there is a lot of room to
Right.
improve upon things that have been shot on location and be able to explain them better through editing. But at the same time, I think it takes someone being very, very close to the material to make sure the soul of the movie stays intact. And so I went back and took another crack at editing it myself and found a different colorist and now it's what you see and it's a accurate representation of what we intended to make.
And that's great that you're able to do that because yeah, I think that that vision comes through for sure. And another thing that I am very impressed with is, and I will bring it up because a story like this in the past, or and I've seen some others as well, would lean towards more, for lack of a better term, spicy scenes that you might have between folks, and you have it implied in here, but you definitely keep it more, we'll just say PG area, which I don't have a problem with it. I found it very impressive. You were able to still get your ideas across. But when you're creating a story like this, especially dealing with intimacy and love and all that, how much does that play in going, do I need a scene like that? Don't I need a scene like that? Not just in this movie, but in general, when you're writing, I always wondered that process of deciding, well, no, this is where she takes her top off, but then, no, maybe we don't need that. And here, like I said, you don't have that. There's implying from
Yeah.
Douglas's view, but how do you go about balancing that or coming up with this is what's needed or what's not needed?
You know, I sit back and I ask myself, how does it help?
Hmm.
Everything that we do in the story, or when we hit the set, I ask, how does this support the story? How does this support the overall vision of the film? And you'll find that you'll oftentimes scratch stuff because it doesn't really add anything to it, or more, or worse, it could actually take things away from it. We didn't really have anything in the
Hmm.
script that
Right.
called for that, but I know that rewrites happen all the time, and you find yourself in a situation where you're like, you know what, actually, this does
Mhm.
really prop up this one bit of the story, because as you were just saying a moment ago, there were lots of opportunities to put something in the film like that, but we ultimately didn't need to.
No, I was gonna say you,
Yeah.
you didn't need to. I like the implication better, and like I said, that one scene with the dialogue is just as effective.
Yeah, it was. And seeing his reaction,
Mhm.
because we never pan away from him.
Right.
We always stay with him as she's whispering this in his ear, which is really just his thoughts.
Right.
But as she says these things, we stay on him, and you watch it go from him feeling a sense of some sort of pride, in the fact that she can kind of see, or she can kind of see that he does have some attraction to her, and she can recognize it, and she doesn't seem as though she has a problem with it. There's this sense of, oh, yeah. And then she switches the subject to his wife, and we go down that road with him, and you watch from that one shot as everything turns,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, and again, Nicholas Brendan putting in a performance I'm not expecting, because a lot of people equate him, unfortunately. He gets typecasted. Folks get in a big popular character, and he was in Buffy, so it was like to see him in a different role was really refreshing.
Mhm.
I always like seeing that for actors because they do get sometimes caught, and he just sells that. I mean, so well through this whole thing to where I, you feel for him, but also you don't. I don't know how you manage that, but I was like, I feel for this guy on one hand because he's his own worst enemy. On the other hand, you kind of being a jerk, it's at the same time, and I think that I like complex characters.
Yeah, I kind of viewed him as being someone who's falling. I watched a movie. What was the movie? It was the remake of the Magnificent Seven,
Oh yeah,
and he tells a joke about the guy falling,
right,
and it says, "How are you? Is it so far so good?
yeah,
And he's still falling. How are you now? So far so good. And he's still falling. How are you now? So far so until he hits the ground.
right.
And I find that that's Nicholas Brendan's character
Hmm.
in this film. So far, so good. So far, so good. So far, so good. But he's not ever really
Right.
that good. And it's hard when you can see the entire picture of someone
Hmm.
to paint them, because he could have very easily been the villain of something.
Right.
He could have very easily stepped into horror territory. It could have been any number of things, and I think there would have still been something there that you would have held on to as him being a human being
Hmm.
and him being somebody that just needs some help. You know, uh, but and it goes back to I've you know played the film for some people, and just to kind of get some thoughts about it. And one of the universal things was a lot of people said, "Man, that Dan, man, he's a terrible guy." And I said, "Is he though?" I don't know if he is. I think that he's just a guy. I think that not that all guys are like that, but he's just a guy.
Right.
He's not someone who. I mean, it's easy to vilify someone, but I think like you said, down in there, there's a heart, you know, and he
Well,
cares about his guy, you
he
know.
I work on my day job. I work in IT and I work for a
Hmm.
retail company. And Dan, you saying that you sold copiers explains so much because Dan is the icon, is a salesperson, and so
Hmm.
I know salespeople like that who have that type of personality, but at the same time, you know them deep down or whatnot. They're not a bad person. That's just
Yeah.
their personality. They walk into a room, they fill the room, they have to be that person. But
Hmm.
if eyes aren't on them, or occasionally they let down that curtain just a little bit, you see, oh, this is the person when they're not being Dan, but they're
Yes.
out in public or around their friends, they have to be Dan. But when he's just probably with Pia, he's not Dan. He's probably Daniel or just, you know, the person who Pia really loves.
Hmm.
It's it's one of those things where you captured him perfectly. Because yeah, at very first time I'm like, oh man, I don't like Dan, but then I'm watching. I'm like, no, I mean his personality isn't great, but he's not horrible. He's just you know,
He's Dan.
he's Dan. He's obnoxious, sure, obnoxious,
Yeah.
but yeah, and seeing the female characters as well, Veronica and Pia, writing those. Now, no offense, you're a guy
Mhm.
writing female parts. Do you ask for input on, say, okay, does this seem realistic with reactions? Does this seem? Do you get some input from, say, a female voice? To make sure that maybe you're writing this correctly, because I've seen some roles written by men for women, and you're just like, yeah, that was written by a guy. Uh,
Well, I think in any capacity when you're writing something, whether I'm writing as a guy for a woman or whether I'm writing as a guy who knows nothing about being a doctor but for a doctor, what you do is you write and you hope that what you wrote, well, what you wrote is honest.
right.
You just want to make sure it's truthful,
Mhm.
right? So you will go to people who do that thing or are that thing, and then you will say, "Hey, how truthful is this, though?"
Sure.
And I do a lot of that. That's why a lot of people, a lot of directors like to rehearse, and a lot of actors like to
Mhm.
rehearse. Personally, I don't like rehearsals. I
Mhm.
don't. I feel that everybody's creative energy can get used up in rehearsals. And so, what I like to do instead is just sit down and talk. We talk about the character, where they are, where they came from. If I shared with you one of my scripts, um, I, I talk about many things in the notes, in the annotations
Sure.
that talk about where the character is, where they just came from, even if it's immediate or if it's 3 years ago. What does this statement mean and why? And then I'm talking about how the scene also fits into the entire film. And then
Right.
I'll speak about how this scene impacts this relationship and that relation. Like it's so many layers upon layers upon
Sure.
layers. And it comes from me just having that dialogue with myself first, and then I go off and I start having that dialogue with the performer
Mhm.
because I want to see from their perspective what they see first. I don't even tell them what I'm thinking. I say, "What are
Right.
you thinking?" And when they tell me, we find a way to make all of that coalesce
Sure.
and work together, um, so that we make that character more fleshed out. There's nothing worse than a cardboard character,
I mean,
just a cardboard cutout.
they have their place usually in horror because you're not going to spend too much time with them. So you're just like, okay, you're the boozer guy, you're the stoner guy, and you're the guy that's going to die first. So that's okay,
Yeah, yeah. if
But-
if if that's if that's where it is,
right? If
if
that's
that's
where,
the qualification.
right?
But I would find it very tough for an hour and a half to watch a
Oh yeah,
relationship suspense, type of film, and the person is very paper thin,
right. Hmm.
with outrageously inconsistent decisions. It would just be very difficult to watch.
Sure,
And
sure.
so, oftentimes, especially later as I've become more experienced, I spend a lot more time before cameras roll trying to make the tightest, um, script possible
Mhm.
in terms of length, but also in terms of breadth, in terms of depth. You know, all of it. I try to do my best before we start rolling cameras to make sure we have the best story to tell.
Well, I think you got a really good story to tell here, sir, with Yesterday is Almost Here. It had me pulled in, and this type of film normally isn't necessarily in my wheelhouse, but I like to branch out, and it was really well crafted. I think the performances help greatly with this. You know, who would you say is your biggest influence? Because you produce, you direct, you edit, you do wear many hats, and you've been doing this for a number of years. Who would you say a director or whatnot would be your biggest influence on what you do?
Ooh, I mean, knee-jerk response. Um, I would say Paul Thomas Anderson. I mean,
Mm,
that's knee jerk. That's knee
sure,
jerk though.
sure.
But if I had to kind of round it out by
Mhm.
saying if I could take bits and pieces from everybody, I would say I love David Mamet. I
Mm,
love the fact that he writes such incredible dialogue and such sophisticated characters, where you could take any protagonist of his and they might be with the exception of Red Belt, you could take most of his protagonists and put them in another movie and they're the antagonist. But you've
sure,
seen so many,
sure.
you've seen so many things from their point of view that you go, no, no, this is the guy, this is the good guy. But they're incredibly complex characters, and he allows them to breathe on camera without trying to over direct. So I really, really love that about him. Quentin Tarantino,
Mhm.
how visceral he can be, very visceral. Um, but then I like trying to put together atmosphere uh, in a similar way of like a Ridley Scott or something
Sure.
like that,
Hmm.
or even a
Yeah,
Michael Mann kind of, putting that atmosphere.
yeah, and that's a great answer because I don't when you ask what's your influence, a lot of people might give one or two answers. Oh, Spielberg or whatnot. The fact that you pull from different ones is a good thing, I think. And I guess to wrap it up here, what would be say someone wants to get into the business? Like I said, you've been doing it for a while, created some great projects. What would you give advice for someone who wants to get into this business, namely directing or writing, producing, or doing all three, just doing it? What kind of advice would you give them?
Um, Persistence beats resistance.
That's a good one. I like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
just keep doing, right? Just keep
just
doing
keep
it.
doing it. Yeah,
Mhm.
keep doing it. Everything you do. Uh, the one thing it took me a while to learn, and my films got so much better after I learned it, was to leave your ego at the door.
Mm, mhm.
Yeah, as an artist, you kind of hang it out there and it can be brutal sometimes taking it on the chin, but take it on the chin. If somebody gives you criticism, not like, oh, you suck, like that's not criticism, that's just
No,
being. But if somebody says, hey, man, you kind of linger on stuff a little long, maybe start tightening it up. I think, Roger Corman said it best. He was like, treat it like a bank robbery, get, get in the scene as late as possible, get out as soon as possible.
sure.
Treat it like a bank robbery. But honest criticism, be able to take it
Mhm.
and see if it applies. Don't just automatically think you know what's best, because then you'll never get anywhere. And I see so many people that I've done films with, and they're no longer making films.
Right.
And it's not because the industry is brutal, because it is brutal, but it's also because they don't learn anything from one project to the next. Their ego that they had to develop in order to take the brunts of all
Right.
these blows, that ego tells them that everything they do is right.
Mhm.
And all they have to do is just keep doing whatever. And it's like, no, no, sometimes you're not correct. Sometimes there's a better way to do this. Sometimes there's a more efficient way to do this.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe the things you hold dear in terms of what you think is important, they are not important. Um, be able to take honest criticism. But if you can check your ego at the door, take honest criticism, and and wholeheartedly believe that persistence beats resistance. You just keep one foot in front of the other when you don't know what to do, just one foot in front of the other. If you keep doing that, success is inevitable.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, sir. I'm so happy we finally got to talk after watching a number of your films. This has been wonderful. Where can they keep up with your projects and what yesterday is almost here. It's getting limited theatrical release. What's next for it?
We start out limited theatrical. Hopefully, we'll be able to expand here in the next month or so.
Mhm.
And if they want to keep track of the film, they can, if they're a website person, they can go to yesterdayisalmosthere.com. If you're an Instagram person, yesterday is almost here at, if it's Instagram or Facebook, you'll be able to find the film and keep track of it. If you just want to keep track of me for some reason, it's Joston Ramon Theney, and you can find my website and my ats and all that stuff for Instagram and Facebook, Joston Ramon Theney, and be able to keep track of what we're doing.
Fantastic. We'll put links of all that in the description of the podcast. Thank you so much, Justin. And yes, check it out if you can near you. Yesterday is almost here. I almost guarantee you'll see it on distribution on the web. Someone would be crazy not to pick this very interesting exploration of relationships up for sure. So thank you again, sir.
All right, thank you.